By 2032, the live events industry, think festivals, sports, gigs, is estimated to reach a value of $1.2 trillion. But while those of us in the audience just see a slick, well-polished show, there's a vast amount of work going on just out of sight and huge numbers of people working with the latest technology to bring it to life. While COVID-19 saw an exodus among high-skilled professionals, the industry is now on the up. So what are the skills needed to deliver the best experience, both to the live audience and to watchers at home? And how can we make sure the industry has the people it needs? Welcome back to Explained, the Southampton Solent University podcast where we attempt to unpack what's going on behind the scenes of modern life, from sport and science to music and law and everything in between. I'm your host, Robin O'Mahony, and in this episode we're taking a look behind the curtain of the live events and creative industries to find out more about what goes on in delivering entertainment to the masses. Today we're joined by Solent's Deputy Head of Film and Media, Lee Davison. A graduate of Solent, Lee started lecturing in media technology at the university in 2014.
Yep.
Lee has a diploma in acoustics and noise control from the Institute of Acoustics, as well as certificates from the British Society of Audiology. At Solent, Lee empowers students pursuing careers in media technology, broadcasting and live events. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. So, obviously, while people still love going to events and love being there and being part of something, lots of new technology has been introduced in recent years, and that's, streaming and other technologies that hopefully we'll talk a little bit about. So the online experience has become a more popular thing too. And obviously if we're going back to sort of COVID, that had a massive impact on how people were experiencing entertainment. Can you tell us, just to get started, a little bit about the general trends there? So, where are audiences in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, live events as a term, I guess, is quite a big term. Encompasses quite a lot of things that you do. So, in terms of music and music gigs, like one thing that I'm noticing a lot now is lots and lots of artists are back on tour. It seems like one of those things where, as you say, technology is changing the way that we get involved in this stuff and get involved in culture. And things like Spotify and those kind of streaming services have made music so cheap that I think many artists now, in order to make a living out of it, have to go back on tour. And I think that's been a huge trend, especially older artists that you think have kind of finished or all back out on the scene again. And so the touring scene and lots of live music is huge at the moment. And also, you mentioned COVID, the idea of COVID and how it's changed. It's the prior buzzword before AI became the new thing that everyone's talking about. It's really changed how we kind of, again, get engaged with culture and music and live events, because it demanded so much of a change in terms of the technology from us. Like, the industry stopped, and so we had to keep it going in some way. And all of a sudden, it's kind of like when there are any major event in the world, technology kind of leaps. And I think a lot of that's cultural. It's not necessarily the technology itself. That's kind of always been there, but people's acceptance and adoption of the technology kind of jumps forward. Yeah. So it's one of those things where things that we could have always done are suddenly socially acceptable. Now we do them a lot more. So things like online gigs and online like live services and events and things like that.
And I think, do you think it's fair to say there's a preference now for things that are online over things that are happening in person? Or do you still think, like, the most popular form are people going and experiencing it alongside other people?
Interestingly, for me, it seems that because there's so many things online now, there's such an amount. We were talking just before about how much TV there is and how you can't
and you haven't seen any of it.
I haven't seen it all, yeah. So because there's so much of it out there, I think it's almost a rejection of it a little bit. So there's so much, that's available online, and all that stuff is great, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. But because of that, I think live events are a focus because people want to get back to the roots again. People getting back to, like you say, live events have always been part of the human calendar, and so we're people back out trying trying to get that connection again. I think it's a
Yeah.
big part, especially again post-COVID. That kind of when lockdowns finished, everyone came out and we had quite a few big events happening.
Yeah, and I think there was probably a little bit of hesitation. I know I spoke to a lot of people. For example, I myself went to the Mayflower Theatre to see a show when the theatre had just reopened, and I remember feeling quite kind of uncomfortable when I was in there, thinking, "Oh my goodness, should I be among all these people?" Now it's just normal again. It's returned to feel kind of not frightening and exciting, And Eventbrite was saying in their kind of industry forecast, which they do every year, that 2025 is the year of opportunity when it comes to events. So maybe people were concerned post-COVID for a few years, but it's been 5 years now. And 8 in 10 event goers are planning to attend the same number of events they went to last year, and maybe even more.
Mm-hmm.
So I did want to ask you what you thought the enduring appeal of a festival, a gig, a sporting event, whatever that might be, whether it's football, cricket, tennis. Why do people love going to these big events?
I don't know, really. Like we say, I think it is just kind of part of the human condition to go and want to do things with other people. It's a social aspect. I think there must be a tribal aspect to it as well. Like when you're with a lot of people that are the same as you, it feels good. It's one of the first things I say to my students, actually, when they join in the first year. I say, you're never going to meet anybody else out there that's the same as you, as these guys will be. Like you are in a unique position here. You've found your tribe, essentially. And I think it's that, in a way. I mean, like a massive gathering of people that have the same interests as you is always going to be popular.
That's really special, isn't it? And I think it is that kind of, I was there. Because I was thinking before we came and did this episode, actually, that about like 9 or 10 years ago, I went to Somerset House to watch Ex Machina, like an outdoor cinema thing. And I think it was the cinematographer that had worked on it was there, and they gave a talk before. And now whenever anyone mentions Ex Machina, I'm like, so just so you know, I saw that at Somerset House and with 2,000 other people, and the cinematographer was there. And I think it is that thing of being like, I was there.
Yeah.
Like you weren't, but I was, and isn't it cool?
Well, there is a part of that, especially again with tech and social media. One of the negatives of events, obviously, nowadays is everyone wants to prove they were there.
Yes.
Sometimes more than being there.
Do you think the technology of someone on their phone, or even technology, the professional bits of equipment being used at the event itself, can that hinder an event a little bit for the people that are there rather than the people viewing?
I think often, especially with live gigs, live music, if you've got lots of cameras and things there, it makes it feel a bit more special even. So I'm not sure it really gets in the way, but certainly people's phones and tablets and things, when they're holding them up, can get in the way, and we know that. But yeah, I think when you're at an event and you know that it's been professionally documented, it kind of makes it feel like more of an event, I suppose.
Yeah, more special to be there. So in terms of the audience, and we've spoken a little bit about people holding up their phones and things, but what do you think are the kind of pros and cons of online or broadcast viewing? Lots of people watch things like Glastonbury, which we'll talk a little bit about in a bit, from home. What do you think is the kind of appeal, and what do you think is the negative of absorbing those kinds of events from home?
Obviously, very big events, very popular things, especially as well as things like live sports. Like most people will be engaging with that because they're so popular and so big, and the ticket prices are quite expensive for such things. That most people will engage with it online. I think there is, especially nowadays, because of how sharp these sort of streaming services and things are. It isn't most of the time. It's not an afterthought. It's an actual, when the productions are planned, they're thinking about what the strategy is for streaming, what extra things can they do to make sure that the filming would work and look good, how do we get feeds from the desk and the cameras to make sure that we've got everything we need after the event to put the, almost said DVDs then, but put the streams out, or whatever documentary stuff might go out. So the tech and how that's come together and the size of the productions really has helped that planning come together, and it all kind of builds in nicely now. So I think that's why people enjoy it at home so much, because there's so much thought put into it. I mean, live sport's a great one because there's so much extra data from sports. One of the cool trends that we're seeing in the broadcast industry is the idea that maybe you watch a race, and when you watch it in person, you don't get a very good experience, really, because you're sat at a certain part of the track and everyone just goes past really quickly. Whereas if you've got it at home, you've often got like camera cockpit views, like cockpit views from the drivers. You've got live telemetry speeds, like corner entry speeds and exit speeds and previous lap times and positions. All this extra data takes an enormous amount of work to put together, and there's a lot of cool tech that goes into that. And that's the bit that I like, you know, getting involved in that. And it actually builds the experience. We've been watching a lot of ice hockey recently, and I've been to a couple of live ice hockey games, and they're great to watch because it's like cool atmosphere. But the major negative is you kind of don't know what's going on sometimes because when you watch it on the TV, there's so many announcements and people are talking, like you get the commentators, they're talking about it and you can actually tell what's going on. Sometimes it's a bit like what happened there, and you have to actually like try and figure it out. So all that extra stuff that goes into live sports I think really helps. Yeah,
that's really interesting because with Formula One, for example, you know, you're seeing it only when it's coming past you and you don't really know kind of what's going on elsewhere. But when you're watching the highlights on TV, you're like very, very informed and you know literally everything and you're seeing it in detail. So it's a much more kind of nuanced experience, isn't it, in terms, and it's multi-layered when you're watching something from home. But then obviously what you don't get is that special feeling of being there. And that can't really be replaced, I suppose.
No, so it's a bit of a trade-off.
Yeah.
F1's a great example because they are working at the moment on, or launching a new platform. I've not seen it myself, actually, but a new platform where you can dive in and pick your own feeds.
Really?
So you're not just relying on somebody producing that for you. You can say, choose. I wonder, you know, what my driver's doing right now. Or, you know, you can actually go in and find bits of the action. Maybe you can pull up certain parts of the team comms and things like that as well. So
that's cool.
Having an interactive experience around that is cool.
Yeah. And just before we go on to the tech side of things, you know, I was thinking as well, like Band Aid, for example, when they did Live Aid, when they did that, you know, they still play that on BBC Four, you know, recordings from a really long time ago, but you watch it as a viewer and you still think, goodness me, that was you can feel the atmosphere through the technology that was used to capture it and the way that it was filmed and the way it was edited afterwards. And, you know, that's just one example. But, you know, last week I was watching a Rolling Stones gig in LA that they'd kind of mixed in with some interview sort of excerpts. It was amazing. Like, whether you kind of like that band or not, it's a really high quality broadcast. And I think is there something in the fact that people, you know, can go back and watch these experiences that were not accessible to them at the time, but then they can enjoy later. Yeah,
I think so. And there's something enduring about the idea of especially live music, because music is so produced now, like everything's perfect.
Yeah.
And I think people might want to hear like the raw a little bit more as well.
Yeah.
Know? I think that really comes out. I often enjoy, especially when I'm working, listening to like live albums, live music. There's so many artists actually, especially when it comes to live music, that I kind of discovered through the live stuff, and if I listen to their produced stuff, it doesn't actually sound as interesting. I don't know quite why that is, but there's certainly something in performance, I suppose. It's about performance.
Yeah, and hearing the crowd interactions as well, because I love it when you hear a song that's been recorded at a gig and you can hear the cheering or the singing along. Like, I think that just adds like an extra element to it, which is really nice. So, okay, tech, which I know nothing. So thank goodness this is called Explained. So obviously there's lots of different specialist roles that go into making live events and broadcasts successful. And when I was researching for this episode, I did find quite a wild fact, actually, that more than a third of the UK population watched Glastonbury on the BBC in 2023, which just felt wild to me. So obviously, in terms of delivering a memorable watch for viewers is a hugely collaborative effort. Can you tell me about some of the behind the scenes roles that go into something like, you know, a Glasgow main stage performance, both maybe for the people that are there at Glasgow and then the people watching it at home?
Yeah, so obviously Glastonbury's a big one. Loads of stuff that gets involved in that, and you know, we do some stuff here at the university with Glastonbury as well. So some of that material that you see on the BBC comes from our cameras, which is cool. But you know, from our point of view, we take a broadcast truck. So we've got a truck that we take. It's basically a studio on wheels. And that has mics and camera inputs and all the things you need to bring into that studio. And there's a number of things that we can do there. We can produce it directly and then send it, or we can take what we call ISO feeds, like isolated feeds of all the different things. So we can take the video and the audio. We can take multiple channels of audio as well. So we can take like just the drums, just the vocals, all that kind of stuff. So it would take a number of operators to do that. One thing that people don't realize as well is when you're doing broadcast work with cameras, the camera color needs to be matched. So there is an engineering role of somebody that they call it camera racking. So you have a system that can just adjust the colors for all the different cameras, and then dynamically during the day you have to adjust them all so that when you switch between the cameras, they don't look different. And that's one of those things that, again, when you're just throwing things together and you might not notice it, you might not realize it until you get back, and then all the colors are different and you have to do a lot of post-processing to make that work. So even in a very in a big gig like Glastonbury, loads of stuff going on. I think there's something like 20,000 staff at Glastonbury.
That's crazy.
It's big. There's lots of stuff going on, but even for something that seems quite small, like just filming a stage, you've got cam ops. You're going to have a handful of those. You're going to have people that are manning the audio desk to make sure the audio feeds are good as well. You've got people directing the vision mixer. We're mixing the video itself, and that's again just for recording one stage. When I went to Glastonbury last, there was 101 stages.
Yeah.
So times that by 101.
There's a lot of specialists there. Yeah.
And then you've got people that are doing a lot of the construction of the stages as well. There's loads of people that will do what we call systems integration. So when you start most festival sites, you've just got a green field. And you've got to make sure that all the different systems that you plug together will all be able to talk to each other, be able to do all the things you need them to do, make sure the inputs and outputs are going to the correct places. And one of the big things that we're seeing a lot now, especially post-COVID, is remote production and remote kind of video workflows. So now, instead of necessarily having a cable for everything, you can just pipe it all up to the internet and grab it back down when you need it.
Okay.
Which seems
fancy.
which is quite fancy. So it's all just like a cloud operation, basically.
Yeah.
And that's huge nowadays for big events. Like we've just had the Pope dying.
Yes.
So there'll be a lot of people running around right now, probably quite hectic.
Yeah. In terms of preparing for when that gets shown on TV. Yeah.
Yeah, and the funeral and all the live events around that, there'll be loads of people prepping that right now.
Yeah, because that will be watched by, billions.
Billions, I imagine.
Billions.
Yeah. And things like the Olympics as well. Like when France did the last Olympics, and there's lots of people like moving lots of cameras around the city.
Yeah.
And it's tech that enables that. Because if you're taking a cable and running it to a camera, you then have to run that cable back to somewhere to be able to get that up to the the broadcast. If you do it with a remote production workflow, you just need an internet connection.
Yeah.
Everything goes up into a cloud bucket, and then you just grab the bits of video you need, and you can actually remotely, dynamically mix that and send it. So you can do all of that there.
Risks there with that way? Just in terms of, the internet went. I don't know, would that happen?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So a lot of the time now, traditionally you used to do it with satellite.
Okay.
So you can still do similar things, but with much smaller amounts of feeds via the satellite links. Nowadays, what people do for important broadcasts, they'll rock up with a truck or something. The first step is to try and find a hardwired connection somewhere. Usually you will have hopefully negotiated all this beforehand, obviously. So you'll find a decent internet pipe. The next step down is usually like a 4G, 5G connection. So you can literally take the same tech that comes from mobile phones and bond all those together. So you can have 4 or 5 5G connections in a box that will bond them all together and give you the bandwidth of all of them.
Wow.
You can also do 5G like local networks as well. So you can connect all of your stuff together and then do that, which is quite useful. And then the last case, or the worst case scenario, is satellite, because satellite is expensive and very quick, and it's kind of satellite is very kind of bespoke. You have to buy licenses and things like that.
Okay.
So if you are a BBC or something like that, you might have that as a backup if you needed something to go somewhere.
Yeah.
It depends. All of the cool thing about technology and how this stuff works now is it's all very tailored to whatever the event is. Like you can do very small events with cloud production, You can do small events and keep it very analog, like this room.
Yeah.
Or you can do big events and have different layers of redundancy depending on how important all the different parts are.
Yeah. So previously, sorry if this is a silly question, but satellite was the main tool used up until when are we talking?
It's a hard question because it kind of blended, really.
Yeah.
So, I mean, decent 4G connections was when we started to see that disappear.
Okay.
I remember years ago we went to Glastonbury, and it was early in the 4G days. And one of my colleagues did a speed test there and realised that they could send the entire feed on their mobile at that point. And I was like, oh, that feels like a difference now.
Yeah.
Because they set up a lot of like temporary internet connections for Glastonbury because there's loads of people there. So yeah, did a speed test while, you know, before that all the punters got there,
Yeah.
and went, oh wow, you know, we could send multiple HD video feeds from here.
Wow.
And it's everything since then, really. A lot of the companies have realised the same thing and brought those together.
Do you feel like the industry needed to quickly, or the people that work in that industry needed to quickly catch up, or do you think that happened quite organically in terms of acquiring those new skills, using new systems?
Right, well, it has to be quick, you know, which is why, you know, when it comes to learning this stuff and teaching this stuff, we don't tend to teach specific tools. You teach the principles.
Okay.
And then when stuff changes, you know it all already, basically. And that's kind of an engineering mindset that we've always had, you know, and I think that's important for people that are in engineering to make sure that you understand a load of the principles. And then whenever new technology comes along, it's never anything particularly new. It's just different stuff bolted in different orders, basically.
Okay.
Which is what we see all the time.
Yeah. You make it sound really easy. Is that because you're a pro?
Maybe.
Maybe I'm a pro. So in terms of, like, obviously we know now some of the tech that's being used. What are the challenges of balancing the needs of the in-person audience versus the audience watching online or at home? Kind of, we obviously, you know, organisers want both sets of audiences to have a great time. Are there challenges when it comes to balancing that for people? Or do you think it's quite seamlessly done? I
think it manages to be relatively seamless. I think audiences are quite resilient to there being lots of tech around, though.
Yeah.
So I think that's why. Like I said, I think it's if audiences are exposed to lots of like cameras and things, and especially when you're at a festival and you see the big like the boom cam come over, it makes it feel like it's a real thing, like a real event. When people are investing big money into things that you're going to, it feels good, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't think that stuff really gets in the way, and it enhances it as well, especially when you think of the same camera feeds go up on the big image magnification screens at things like festivals, and that at races and things they do the same thing. So you have a big image magnification screen and you can pull that and put whatever you want up there. So it might just be the feed from the day, for like it's going out to the TV, sorry, or it might be something bespoke for that particular place.
Yeah.
Interestingly, not to talk about hockey again, but
but I'm gonna.
Yeah, the coaches actually use the broadcast stream. So when stuff happens that might be contentious, like the ref has chosen something, they have little iPads and they scroll back through and they take the broadcast stream, so they can actually replay it through and say whether they want to challenge it or not.
Is this like VAR?
Like VAR. So it's a place where the technology and the things that are happening in the broadcast world have actually fed back into the sport itself. Which is quite
that's
interesting.
interesting. I've got a question. You might not know the answer, in which case we'll just edit it out. And this is more just because I wondered this recently. Formula One, when the man's commentating, or the lady, are they there or are they watching it on a screen?
I don't know, actually.
Because like Wimbledon, right? They're commentating and they are there, but they are watching a screen. So they're not really...
Yeah, and that might be another place where the broadcast stuff has actually helped them. Because they're taking a bunch of feeds from...
to help them commentate in a way that's actually comprehensive.
Yeah. Because it's really awkward. And I imagine this happened. It might be that they're there, but they've got like the normal view. You know, they've got like a bird's eye view down, especially, again, things like football games and things like that. But if you can get the EVS, which is the slow motion machine, and have a feed from that, then you can tell what's going on before the people do, because they're going to see it on the TV.
Yeah.
So if you make a call that something has happened as a commentator, and then the people see the people watching telly see what actually happened, and you're wrong, then that's not a good move, I think. So they need to see the broadcast feed as well, so they can see what people are watching. Yeah.
So it has a benefit for the people that are actually working behind the scenes as well as those that are watching it.
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm interested in talking about skills gaps actually in this area, because when I was researching for this episode, that was one of the main things that kept popping up, was how, sorry to mention COVID again, but hey, it was quite big. Mm-hmm. It was a fairly big event. It had a significant impact on the creative industries, and obviously particularly live events. No gigs, no festivals, kind of meaning no work for a lot of people. So, freelancers, sought after, very highly skilled professionals kind of migrated to other sectors in a lot of cases. And apparently only half of those returned to live events after COVID. So there was a big skills gap there. We are 5 years on now. Is that gap getting smaller? And what can we do to attract people to live events and media technology and all of those roles?
The last question is a good one because I don't know.
I like your honesty.
Yeah, in terms of the skills gap, it's always been big, to be honest, in media tech. It always has. People are very interested in creative work because it's interesting. It doesn't feel like work. It's great. It's great fun. People that go out into the media tech industry work in cool places, things like Formula One and all kinds of live events and sports events that happen. Big companies like Sky do a lot of them. Lots of live football, all those kind of things that happen. There's loads of it. And they are all in real demand of people to work in them. Yeah. There's a gap in terms of people that are interested in creative industries. There's a bunch of those. There's a bunch of people that are interested in the engineering sector. And it's where those two things link together. People don't see it as a big sector, but it's actually really necessary. Like the UK creative industries is a huge part of our economy, and the technical work actually makes that happen. So while it's, there's nothing wrong with people being in the creative sector and doing creative work, we do need technologists and media technologists to make it happen in the first place.
Yeah.
And again, it's when things are changing, and especially when things are changing rapidly, it's media technologists that need to adapt to that very quickly and adapt to new systems and push things forward and move things on. And there's a huge skills gap in people that can manage that. People that don't know specific systems, but they do know what things might get plugged together to make a new system happen. In the broadcast world, we've seen this in terms of we've kind of talked around it in terms of contribution, is what they call it when they're sending video in IP, so internet world. Moving things into IP has been a huge thing that's happened over the last sort of 5-10 years in the broadcast world. And it's basically where instead of having dedicated cables for everything, you have just generic cables that can carry anything you might need it to.
Okay.
So facilities these days, and we've got these kind of facilities around here as well, you have a generic network, and the network has different sources and sinks. So you can pull stuff from places and push media different places. And so adapting to that system has been a huge step, painful one for the broadcast sector. There's entire rooms full of equipment. And some of that equipment needs to stay there and carry on living. And you need to do some kind of middleman work to make it work with the new stuff. And loads of it needs to be pulled out and scrapped and then changed to new equipment so that it can work in the new sort of IP internet workflow. And then you've also got alongside that, which is similar but slightly different, everything moving to the cloud as well. So all of that equipment that you might be using to do lots of video processing, you might buy a software license for it and do it in the cloud now.
Yeah.
So that might work very well, but you might have a TV channel that wants to do that for one thing and then everything else is on premises. So you have this big workflow where they've got something very analog that comes in through a camera, then it goes to another sort of system, and then it goes through something else, and you've got to kind of glue it all together. No one was doing that 5 years ago, and now that's really common.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to adapt and pick up new skills as you go.
With the changes that have been happening, have we seen roles be lost because of the replacement of technology, or actually have we seen more skills needed, or is it a mix of both?
I think it's a mix of both. A lot of what my world kind of looks at is people that support those kind of things, so people that build, maintain, move, adapt studios and things like that. So there are changes in the way that people operate and build this gear. But I think the major change is that people need to have a decent knowledge of different things now. Like I say, before you could have somebody that was just a specialist in cameras and they would be interested in the ins and outs of cameras. They'd know things that, the different plugs that operate in camera world. But now, if you're interested in cameras, that camera might be sending something in IP world. So you need to be a network engineer as well. So like understanding how computers work, because everything's based on general computer model nowadays. We're moving towards a generalized IT computer model for basically everything, it seems. Like specific equipment is going away, and software packages that do everything as well as everything else is in one box is the way that things are moving. So you need to understand how computers work. You need to understand how networking works. You also need to understand like signals and electronics and that kind of thing and how that flows. And all of that is on top of you being a media engineer generally, understanding what things are needed in which locations and all that kind of stuff as well. So I think really it's just a huge demand on a bunch of that kind of underlying knowledge that people need to operate in that space now.
It's very complex.
It's kind of, yeah.
Do you think that puts people off?
Probably.
Or is that what attracts people, maybe?
Well, that's
or do you think it's a bit of a double-edged sword?
A bit,
yeah.
I mean, nothing in its own right is complex. It's just when you bundle lots of things together, it becomes complex. So that's why you kind of have to break things apart, and that's why when you come and learn things like degrees, you have a chance to separate things out into modules and do things individually. And then when you stand back, you realise that when you bundle it all together, you've got a teleprogram, basically.
Well, that leads me nicely into my next question, which is, what's the role of a university when it comes to equipping professionals? And you have just said, modules play a huge role, but maybe people don't think that they need to come to university for a job in media tech live events. Why should they?
Well, you see this a lot. And one of the things you also see a lot is people saying, everything's new all the time, so universities can't keep up, obviously. But that's kind of why I always say the role of what we do is not to specifically teach certain systems. It's to teach all of the fundamental principles. And that's what I think the role of university is. You have time to do that. You can't get that from training. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Universities provide education instead of training. That's what I always say. And education allows you to stand back, understand things from a fundamental level, and then rebuild everything after that. You can go to, and lots of people say, well, I can just get training in, say I wanted to go and do like a live event. I could learn how to use an EVS system for slow motion. I could learn how to operate a camera. I could learn how to, any of these individual roles. And you could do that, and that's fine. But as soon as something changed, you would need to be retraining, or you would need to, you need to retrain, I guess. You need to retrain in that particular thing. Whereas if you understand all of those underlying principles, you can kind of see what's on the horizon and what changes. And so that's what it is for me.
So I'm interested in what you're excited about. What are some of the kind of evolving tech amazing things that are coming?
New stuff.
Yeah, new stuff. That's a better way of putting it. Thank you. New stuff. It is the afternoon right now, and I might need a cup of tea. I'm just saying.
Well, in terms of new things, there are lots of interesting things. One of the cool things about the media tech world is that TV is kind of handled now. We can make good TV. And live events are kind of similar. Like, if you want to put something on that's relatively vanilla, it's all there. What I like is that people are really trying to find new niches and interesting places to do different stuff. And that's where the cool stuff comes in for me. And I kind of downplay the idea of AI, but it does allow us to do new stuff that's quite cool. Especially when it comes to sports, you can do things like track players.
Yes.
So you have something like football. You can track every player, their position on the field. You can say, and once you've got that information, you can do things like, right, how often do they play there? How often do they make a run and find a space? You can do things like heat maps of different places and how they, where players spend most of their time, like how often they're running fast versus slow, or how many miles they've done in a particular game, or kilometers, I suppose. All that stuff's quite interesting and not necessarily new, again, because nothing's new, but it's just having the social acceptance and the impetus to go ahead and do it. And I think audiences like that stuff now because they've seen it, and they make, it allows broadcasters to make a move in that direction. Like, one of the cool things I've seen is, like, you watch a basketball game, and because you're tracking player locations and you have a history of player movements based on some AI system potentially, maybe when they go to take a shot, you could put a percentage of what the hit chance is going to be just before they take it.
Yeah.
Or you could highlight maybe gaps in the field. And if you could highlight that gap before it is then filled and the other team scores or something, then that's cool.
Yeah.
That allows like a new, using AI and kind of fast computer systems, we can analyze that stuff faster than people could without slowing the game down. And that's where it becomes new.
Yeah.
That's where it becomes interesting.
That is interesting.
If we can dive into those kind of stats and things and draw out really meaningful information for audiences and then show them it, and then it happens, then that's quite cool.
I wanted to ask, actually, based on what you just said, is it kind of like a knowledge transfer now as well? Like, we're using it as a tool for like sharing knowledge, because as you said, if we can have this really complex technology that can transfer information to audiences, they're learning a lot more about a sport they might like. Is that a new way of educating people? Yeah,
potentially. And like I say, I think we'll see more examples of how that affects the sport as well. Like, if those things are insights that people are interested in and they're learning new information about it, the coaches will want to do the same thing too.
Yeah.
And then they'll do that in real time, live, and then maybe that affects the game. Like, once you sort of do these things, they don't go back usually. Those kind of broadcast techs, again, like VAR, has changed the way the football plays now.
Yeah.
Whether that's good or bad.
I was going to say, people have quite strong opinions about that, don't they?
I think that's calming down a little bit, though.
Yeah.
I actually went and saw one of those systems, a big conference in Amsterdam last year. The guys the team that build that, and I set one up, actually, like pinpoint the different parts of the pitch, and you can see like the line of whether things are offside and things like that, and how it's all built. And again, it's just broadcast tech, really.
Yeah.
It's just cameras. So yeah.
Why do you think people have such big responses to things like VAR when it's first introduced? Do you think it's a fear that it's going to change experiences in a bad way?
I think it's just because it slows the game down, really. But I think you would have either the same people or a very similar sized group that would be complaining about referee decisions before that.
And not having it, yeah.
So when you change anything, you're going to have like pros and cons, really. I think that just comes down to that.
Yeah.
I think it's a positive for the game because you get the right decision and people take the time to take the right decision. And I think there are maybe a quiet minority of people that probably would see it as quite fun. Like, when there's a decision that has to come up, everyone's doing their home like armchair VAR at home. They're seeing it all in slow-mo, like they really know what they're talking about. I think people like to have their armchair punditry thing when they're at home.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's definitely a foul, come on.
And it increases that kind of experience that they're having as well, because I suppose there is that thing of accessibility when it comes to going to live sports and festivals. Prices now are, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And people maybe can't afford to go. So the fact that they can watch it at home and have their own kind of experience really matters, I think, so that people aren't excluded from experiencing culture and sport.
Yeah, absolutely. But interestingly, it's seemingly kind of regardless of what the prices are, they always sell, don't they? So I think people just want to go.
Yeah, definitely.
So
people want to be involved.
There's always a market for it.
Yeah. Okay, so we like to talk about the future in every episode. What do you see happening in the future when it comes to media tech and events? Kind of maybe what trends do you see? What kind of exciting advancements might there be?
I don't really know. I think the AI thing will rumble on a little bit longer. And while I say it's nothing new necessarily, it does continue to produce things that you didn't expect. So it's hard to predict really what might happen in that front. But there's lots of tools at the moment that are kind of becoming part of the broadcast chain. So not necessarily things that just come up on screen that are AI driven, but lots of small workflow enhancements along the way. Things like you can get it to write code, AI. So a lot of the things that a lot of graduates do when they leave is these systems are all relatively new and they kind of don't interplay necessarily perfectly very well. So they often write little scripts as glue to glue things together. And I think AI kind of helps that happen. So that will continue to happen, I think. But in terms of the next big thing, I'm not so sure. I think one of the things that we're pushing for at the university is interesting technological experiences. So we kind of see that around here as the future. So maybe we have for instance, we have got a big virtual production studio,
I've seen it, I love it,
which is cool, and we get quite involved in the tech in there. But one thing we were looking at now is, so VP is relatively new, 4 or 5 years. Filmmakers have used it, and obviously it's a tool designed for filmmakers or TV or whatever, but people making video essentially. What happens if we take all those same tools and technologies and give it to other artists? And that's what we're looking at. We're putting a bid together at the moment to look into that a bit further. And we had a big discussion about what that might mean. And we've got loads of cool and stupid ideas of like problems we could solve. And we sat there and we thought, well, but we don't want to solve all the silly problems that we can come up with. We want people that are in the arts to come up with problems that we can solve for them. So we are aiming to create some what we're calling residencies. So people come in and they might be a poet or like a sculptor or I don't know, all kinds of different art. Everybody apart from filmmakers. And how can we say, right, well, if you have the access to this, because we've got this, here's a rough overview of its capability. We can track things. We've got a big telly. We've got game engines that look really realistic. What could we do, pie in the sky, that would be interesting to your area of art? And how can we solve those problems? So we're looking into that. So maybe you can have a live experience that's very much based on, again, I'm trying to solve problems that don't exist yet, but maybe it's like something where the audience is tracked in some way, or maybe the audience can vote on something that changes the outcome, or maybe everyone gets a different experience based on a score. Maybe it's like gamified in some way. So they come in and the experience is different for everybody in some way because they have a certain data they've input to the system, or a different language or something. I don't know. There's lots of things we can do, but we're kind of exploring a little bit in that area at the moment because the future's kind of unclear until we do that.
It feels like a limitless area, to be fair. Like, you know, is it? Do you see it just evolving continuously?
Again, one of the kind of problems we have is that we need problems to solve. Engineers need problems to solve, I guess, is the point. And I guess you kind of rely on creatives and that interplay between engineering and creativity. They give us problems to solve, and then we use those problems to create cool solutions that are good for people to see.
Yeah,
that's what we aim for.
My brain went to ABBA while you were talking. Do you know what I mean when the show that everyone goes to, they're like projections on stage?
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking
like
about
the Gorillaz did the same thing, didn't they, with the holograms?
So yes, holograms. It happened at Coachella with Tupac a few years ago, and then you've got Taylor Swift who's introducing kind of VR technology into her Eras tour. What's the kind of, are we going to see more of that kind of entertainment which utilizes the latest tech? And why is that so attractive to people? I mean, the ABBA event especially is hugely popular, and you know, that's literally just going along and looking at holograms, but people love it. Yeah,
I guess it's a way of reliving certain things that you can't get back, especially with the Tupac thing. You know, and
that blew my mind, by the way.
Yeah. And it's another use of AI because you can, I mean, we know that you can model voices, but I believe you can also model like characteristic movement as well. So if you were designing an animation set for a digital model that you were displaying on a screen, and you had lots of video footage of people moving in, you know, whichever way they move, you could use that to kind of generate an AI characteristic movement of people and make it look like they would do. There's nothing stopping that kind of thing from happening. Again, it just needs an audience, you know. If there's people to see it, we can make it happen.
I think there is an audience for it, for sure. I mean, in terms of what Taylor Swift did during her tour, you said about, you know, getting back an experience that you wouldn't have been at or you might have missed, but is there also something in the fact that people get to experience what it's like to be someone?
There's a big move, I think, or there's at least some sort of research around about volumetric video as well at the moment. So basically, you could take video of a space and then turn it into a 3D model that is kind of videoed from every angle, so it becomes a 3D space that you can move around and look around in. Again, as a research idea, I love the idea that you could film a short film and then release it in volumetric video as well, and maybe when you're looking around the space it might tell a different story.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's something I've been trying to look into recently, trying to get like a team here on board, and if we manage it, it might be out there at some point.
No pressure, Solent.
Yeah, right. But we have, I love the idea that you watch a scene and you get certain impression, but then you put a headset on and move around the scene, and maybe there's some hidden details that make the scene hit differently in some way.
I feel like we've only really scratched the surface of all of these amazing pieces of technology and what's possible, but we're going to cut it there. But it's been awesome and really interesting, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
Thank you. Big thanks to Lee for joining us on the final episode of Season 1 of Explained, and thank you, listener, for tuning in. We're taking a break over summer, but we'll be back in the autumn to dive into more interesting topics with the help of our academic experts here at Southampton Solent University. If you like what you heard today, let us know. You can find us online at solent.ac.uk, as well as on all your favourite podcasts and social media platforms. Leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode, and support Explained by hitting that subscribe button. Thank you, and see you soon.